Are gender and sex the same thing? Let's talk about it. Hey, what's up? Welcome to Kingdom Clarity. My name is Eric. The goal of this channel is to bring biblical clarity to a controversial world. And today, for our conversation, we have two very special guests with us. I'm going to introduce them because they're going to be a part of this conversation. So first, Olivia.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I'm 25 years old, and I'm a social worker.
How long have you done that?
So right out of college, so since 2020.
Okay.
So about 4 years.
All right.
Yep.
Great. Okay. And Taran.
Hi, I'm Taran. I'm 27. I also do social work, and we work at the same company, which is kind of fun.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're going to be really helpful to get a balanced understanding of this topic of gender versus sex versus expression versus all of the layers to what's happening in this conversation. And so our goal today, we are not playing doctors. We are not licensed in any of this conversation. We're normal people that love Jesus, and we're trying to navigate this conversation with biblical clarity, but also just some honesty. And so you may agree with a lot of the things we say, you may not at all. Our hope today is just have an honest, candid conversation. So we're going to start doing that by watching a clip together. Maybe you've seen this, maybe this is new for you. It's an interview that happened on Dr. Phil some years ago, and this man, Matt Walsh, is interviewing a couple, and they have a very interesting view on what is a proper definition of a woman. And so we're going to react to this in just a moment. Watch this with us.
Your definition is that a woman is someone who is female, you said, right?
Correct, is a biological female.
So what happens if we have maybe someone who is female, identifies as a woman, right? You know, cisgender woman, right? As you just explained, maybe doesn't have the ability to reproduce. Maybe doesn't have those organs that you're talking about that are reproductive organs.
I have answered the question. You stood up here and said trans women are women.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean. What is a woman?
Womanhood is something that, just as Ethan explained, I cannot define because I am not
But
myself.
you used the word, so what did you mean when you said trans women are women if you don't know what it means?
Right? So here's the thing. So I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman. Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term. It includes people
That describes what?
People who identify as a woman.
Identify as what?
As a woman.
What is that?
Was to each their own. Each woman, each man, each person is going to have a different relation with their own gender identity and define it differently.
Okay. I've seen that clip many, many times, and it never surprises me how difficult to understand some of this concept is. And so I want to turn this question over to the ladies in the room, okay? So the question here, obviously this is someone who's identifying as a, I actually don't know. I don't know if he identifies as a man or a woman, but he has a beard, and so obviously born a male. And so the question that Matt was trying to get across here is, what is a woman? And so I want to turn this over to the ladies. I'm not a woman. So either one of you want to try to just give our audience a definition of what a woman is to you?
I feel like I would define a woman as somebody who's able to reproduce and bring life into the world. So that would be like my main definition. I don't think a man can do that. I mean, who's to say in this world what they're doing with, technology and medicine, but I think biologically being able to reproduce is what I would say a woman is.
Okay, let me ask you a question, because I know this is how some will actually fight against this. Well, there's some women who can't produce children even given the right organs, and somehow that's almost like a loophole to like, well, if that's the definition of womanhood, you have to be able to reproduce children. So it's not the actual, because we believe God is the one who gives and takes life, and so, but having those organs, is that necessary? Is that what is necessary to be a woman to you?
To be, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay.
No,
what about you?
I would completely agree. I don't think you summed it up perfectly, so I don't think I would add anything. That's pretty accurate.
Okay. So you base your view of what a woman is on biology.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah.
And so, well, I would say you're in really good company of every doctor and physician for thousands of years. They viewed this the same way. And so I was raised in the 80s, and so things were different. It's amazing how fast things have changed in my lifetime, even in this last 10 years, how rapidly terms are changing and definitions are changing from what medical professionals have agreed upon forever. But in the 80s, like, I had no concept of this at all. 90s, it just didn't exist. Like, the most feminine thing that I knew of was like the band Kiss. But these were straight men who, for an act, they dressed up and wore some form of makeup. They didn't act like women, but that was the closest idea I had to this concept of like a certain gender wanting to act like the other. And so I guess my question is, why do you think, or do you think it's important to have clarity for Christians? We're talking to Christians. Do you think it's important to have clarity on like if someone's a man or a woman and be able to have like clear clarity on that?
I 100%. I think as Christians, we need to almost have like an outline of what God is calling us to do in our biological like sex, right? Whether you know I'm a female, what is God calling me as a female in my walk with Him? So I think we definitely need to have those clear, like, what does God tell us we are as females, and like what does that role look like in our walk with Him and just in life?
And we'll actually get to some of that before the end of this. We're going to talk specifically about what God has said on this to hopefully bring clarity. But what about you? Do you see a lack of clarity in your workplace, in your environments that you go? Do you see a lack of clarity on who they are in the most like intrinsic part, man, woman, neither?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially over the last, because I've been doing social work for like the last 7 years, and I feel like this whole movement has started around like 2020. It got like really big, 2019, around that time. And there was a lot of confusion around their identity and who they are. I've seen that a lot with my clients, especially because I work with young adults. And in that community especially, they are really struggling with just their identity and knowing their basic roles, kind of like what Liv said.
So I know that this concept isn't fully new, but it has got gas poured all over it.
For sure.
And so like I said, I'm a 40-year-old male, so like I feel very disconnected from this confusion. And so when was the first time that you were ever introduced to this concept of there being a difference between gender, sex, expression, pronouns, how you express yourself to other people that may be different? When's the first time you felt like you were introduced to this?
Oh gosh. I don't even know. Like, I think it was more of like end of high school, maybe like going into college. And I went to GCU, so like it's a Christian university, but that doesn't mean that, you know, people aren't talking about this kind of stuff. But definitely in the workplace for sure. But growing up, I don't think that was ever something that I like was confused about or saw like examples of, like, oh, this person, I can see them physically, they're a male, but they're acting like a female, right? So I don't think, I would probably say like college, and like definitely like when I graduated and got into the secular world, especially the, you know, mental and behavioral health field. So I would say, yeah, that's, it's a very recent thing, I would say.
Yeah.
So when I started in behavioral health, I would always see glimpses of, you know, a client that was, they would say cross-dressing, but now it's become more of the norm. And especially like I was saying around like 2019, 2020, you would see, you'd have to put your pronouns in your emails for, you know, for work. And if you didn't talk to that person in their pronouns, then you would not be
you would be like offensive.
Yes,
almost.
you would not
like
be-
you wouldn't be accepting of
you'd
that
be
person.
offensive.
And that is the reality. And now this is taken off so much to where like you almost wonder like there's really not any going back from this. Like it's become so socially acceptable. And I do think it's definitely taken roots in the last 10 years, 15 years, up until like 2009, 2010. The World Health Organization, they defined someone who now we would say is is trans, I guess is the word you would use, that they had a condition called gender dysphoria. And they viewed that as a mental illness. So like up until 15 years ago, every medical professional in the world agreed upon the biological parts that you were born with. That is who you are. Now, it doesn't mean that some women aren't more masculine and certain men aren't more feminine in their demeanor. And some, a lot of that I think has to do with how you were raised. If you're raised by a single dad, single mom, I think that plays a lot into that. But this topic, I think, is only going to become more persuasive, and Christians are going to have a really difficult time in coming years to give a biblical definition of what it means to be a man and a woman. So I'm going to read to you. This is straight off of WebMD, which a lot of people go to for their definitions and clinical diagnosis. This is how they define some of these roles. So they define sex. They categorize it as female or male, but there is variation in biological attributes that compromise sex and how those attributes are expressed. Gender is not the same as sex. They say gender refers to the socially constructed roles, behaviors, expressions, and identities of girls, women, boys, men, and gender diverse people. So these are new definitions that gender diverse people wouldn't have ever been around in that definition 15 years ago, but now it is. They say sex is the body. Okay, so they're going to make distinction between sex and gender. Sex is the body, chromosomes, genitalia, secondary sex characteristics. Gender identity is the brain. If you don't differentiate them, you end up confusing two distinct things. It works out okay in many cases because people have sex and gender that correspond. But in other cases, it causes confusion and harms people. Okay, so this is their definition. They're supposed to be kind of leading the way in clarity for the world to understand. But I don't know if you're like me, but this kind of makes it a little bit more confusing. And so what our hope is that we can simplify this by looking to the originator of people, mankind, male, female. We believe God is the creator of all those things. We believe, yes, he created the planet and all the world, but us as people and everything about us. So in these definitions, I think we get more confusion. And so what I want to ask you guys is there a time where because I have empathy for people who are going through confusion. And like I said, many times this has a lot to do with upbringing and their environment, abuse that's taken place. I know no one wants to talk about that, but some statistics are as high as 4 out of 10 kids in high school right now have some sort of gender confusion. Either they're attracted to their same sex or they want to be a totally different sex. I mean, 40% of teenagers right now. And so, tell me maybe of an interaction you've had with a young person that kind of solidifies where we're at right now in culture. Taran, is there...
Yeah, I had one encounter with a client, and they were born a female and now identify as a male. And they were kind of processing with me some conversations that they had with their therapist, and they made the connection that the abuse that they experienced as a child is the reason that they are now identifying as a male. Mm-hmm. And for them, it's easier to compartmentalize that abuse by being a male, because if they identify with the young girl that was like abandoned or abused, it's harder for them to process that. So they're almost in a way coping with that abuse by now taking on a new identity. And so that for me was really eye-opening to know that abuse can take many forms, and how they cope with it can look like assuming a new identity. So
that's really interesting when you frame it that way, because I think when we've gone through something traumatic in life, like we want a new start and we want a do-over. And I guess now, because the way in which these terms have been redefined, and now you have a whole medical community, you can't even be a doctor and have a different opinion on this anymore. They'll blacklist you. You'll get your license removed. I mean, there's things happening in Canada and different parts of the world. Even if you go and talk to a pastor and say, hey, I'm dealing with this struggle of same-sex attraction, or I just feel like, I'm put in the wrong body. If you give biblical counsel, you can go to jail for it. Like, that's where we're at in this movement. And so, like, man, that's so sad, because what we're doing is we're skipping over all of the help and the attention and the care for the person who's been abused or is deeply conflicted. We're just skipping past all of that and say, well, here's some pills to change your hormones, or here's a surgery to take parts of your body away or add new ones. And the thing is there's a whole part of the world that will just celebrate you and make a hero out of you. And then it gives you a place of belonging, gives you like a sense of, man, I'm new. I can start over.
Yeah. I think I work mostly with kids, and I don't have a specific example, but I see a lot of the times these kids are just genuinely like confused, and they don't really know I don't really think they know the difference, because there is so much confusion and in the schools, in our with our friends. And so these kids start to question, like, oh, am I really supposed to be a male, even though I kind of feel like I'm more feminine. And I think these kids just start to have a lot of like anxiety and depression, and I think this generation is in a real identity crisis, because the world is just confused and distorted. What seems like such a simple thing to understand. So
I think it's one of the more simple things that God did. I mean, there's certain debatable parts of the Bible, theology, doctrine, that we can like, you know what, there's some ambiguity in how you interpret this. I think in this part of a basic human creation, God was explicitly simple to help us, because he sees things from the beginning to the end. And so like he knew this was coming. And actually this sexual kind of perversion, this isn't new. It kind of comes in waves, and the Romans were extremely sexually illicit. And so for us, our hope is, what has God said? How can we stand on that as true? How can we help young people and get to the core of confusion? But I know there's people that are going to destroy us in the comments over this. To have a biblical view and a simple view in the most progressive generation that obviously I've lived through and has existed in America, maybe. This message sounds dogmatic. It sounds like you're dismissive of people, that you don't care about people, that you want to just force people into something that they aren't. And what we're trying to do is simplify it. So again, I want to read from WebMD. This is how they even further define sex. They determine it at birth according to the baby's chromosomes. So like when I was a kid, 80s kid, the doctor, a lot of times they knew beforehand, but if they didn't know your gender, you come out of your mother's womb and it's obvious what you are. Like there's a very small amount of people that are called intersex. And again, some communities want to make that the whole argument. It's like the same argument with abortion when you go to the topic of rape and incest. It's such an incredibly small amount of the people. So we're not really talking about that. We're talking about people who were assigned genitalia and organs at birth. So they do define sex that way, as someone who has certain chromosomes, gonads, and anatomy. So chromosomes are these tiny structures, these tiny cells that house your unique DNA. Now, we believe that the reason every single person has their own unique DNA code, iris, fingerprints, all of these parts of you that have never existed before is because there's a creator, and he's never duplicated you. You are unique in every way. They would say a pair of chromosomes determine whether you are male or female. Females have two X chromosomes and males have an X and a Y. And you cannot change this part of you. No matter what you do or what surgeries you have, you cannot change these chromosomes because they were assigned to you by your creator at birth. Now, again, that can sound very limiting to some people. They think that's unfair, but it's the truth. There's no way around that. Then you get into gonads, which are reproductive organs. So males have certain body parts, testicles, and other parts, and females have ovaries, and these are unique. So, Taran, when I asked you before, like, what is a woman's definition to you? You were basically saying someone who was born with ovaries. They're the only type of reproductive organ that can produce a child. So that defines sex. And then you have anatomy, and you can just look to a man and a woman, and there's certain parts that exist on women that don't exist on males, and vice versa. And so you get into these categories of sex. So female, we've talked about some of those chromosomes, body parts. Male, same thing. And then you get into these other definitions. And this is where I think it gets confusing. So you have male, you have female. People understand those two concepts. Then you get into this subject of non-binary. Okay, now this is a new term. For a younger generation that's maybe growing up, and this is the term they've known for their whole life, just understand these terms are new. These did not exist before just less than 20 years ago. And so this term non-binary, it means a person who identifies and feels that their gender identity doesn't align within the male or female division. Non-binary is an umbrella term that represents a variety of people. There is no single non-binary gender identity. Okay, this is WebMD. There is no single non-binary gender identity. So you have male, you have female. But now what you've done is you've said there's endless and limitless opportunities for us. I just want to stop and pause. Is this helping you understand gender and sex? Is this more confusing? What is happening in your brain when you hear these things?
It's definitely more confusing. I feel like you can identify with something one day and then the next day you can be something else. So to me, it's very confusing.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I would agree. It's like all these new things come out, and it's hard to understand the difference between all of those new terms that have come out. So 100%, it's definitely more confusing, at least to me.
Yeah,
and Darren.
but you know what some people would say? They'd say, well, that's your problem, not ours. You're the one who's confused, not us. You're the one who needs to get up to speed with the times, and you're living in this old-fashioned view of sexuality and gender and attraction. And so that's where this becomes so divisive. And elections are hanging on this topic. People, anyone who maybe is outside the church, they say the reason that, people that are confused or struggling, that they don't want to be a part of the church, is because the church's stance on this is too clear. It's too black and white. You leave no room for expression. And so where this really comes from, and I'm going to read you two places. So in Genesis chapter 1, it says in verse 27, so God created mankind in his own image. So we believe that God is the one who is doing the creating, and we are made in his image. That's every person who's ever existed. It says, in the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Okay, I didn't tell you those are my terms. I'm telling you, if you are a Bible-believing Christian, because again, this podcast is for Christians, how do we run from this? How do we try to interject new terms, new expressions, when God, in the very beginning, in all of creation, we don't look to animals and say, well, a goat is actually a dog. We don't. You know why? Because we accept that when God created that goat, that it's a goat. We don't try to change the terms of what it is, because we can look at a goat and say, that's a goat. I know that's a goat, because it's always been a goat. But now where we are in humanity, it's we don't want to have the simplicity of male and female. God created them. And why did he create them? To populate the earth and to worship him. And this is not a callous. I'm not being rude in saying this, but two males cannot populate the earth. Two females cannot populate the earth. It's impossible. You need a male and a female. You need both to do that. And I think that's why God created it that way. He kind of, it's almost like he knew something. So my question for you guys is, does this definition, does it make it simpler or harder for us to have clarity on gender, sex, attraction, expression? Is it better or worse to have this clear definition?
I think it's pretty clear.
Is it helpful that it's clear?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's better.
Okay. Does this hurt you? Does this harm you to have clarity on one of the most basic parts of who you are? Does it help you, what God said, or does it hurt you?
Helps us.
It helps you.
Mm-hmm.
How does it help you?
I mean, we know how we were created, and it wasn't a mistake.
Okay. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything from you?
Yeah, I think we have a specific role, and God was very clear in what he wanted for male and female and how he wanted us to, reproduce and subdue the earth and multiply. And so I think it's pretty clear in what he wants and what he calls for us.
Yeah, and so obviously, if you get back to the base, if you don't believe in God, you won't believe in him as a creator. So our starting point as believers is God is the creator of all things. We are made in his image. He is not made in our image. And so I view those as good things, that God was clear. He was he was good, and he called it blessed in mankind. I'm going to read one last portion of scripture, just because if I haven't triggered enough people by now, this will bring all the triggers in. So Ephesians chapter 5, this is going to give us instructions for Christian households. And this is going to be talking about marriage. Now, there's all sorts of this that people hate. But I just want you to hear the language that is used to describe what a marriage is to God. And again, what's the point of marriage? It's to subdue the earth and fill it with people. Again, that's God's original. Now, if you don't ever have kids, doesn't mean you're not blessed and God isn't happy with you. But I mean, God's plan was to populate the earth, and he did this through marriage. And so Ephesians chapter 5, I'll read it to you, verse 21. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Okay, this is a man and a woman in marriage. Submit to one another. Wives, submit to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. Trigger warning. Big trigger warning. Verse 23, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. I know that's a loaded text, and there's a lot of conversation. We're actually going to have a episode on this soon. Verse 25, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own body. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. Explicitly clear gender roles are given here. And the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and his wife must respect her husband. Okay. So what I see here, tell me what you guys hear in this. Outside of the like, wives submit to your husband, husbands love your wives. Like, what else are you hearing in this instruction for a healthy dynamic at home?
That the husband should love their wives as they love themselves. I think that's a thing that stands out to me.
I was going to say love.
Okay.
Is what I hear a lot.
Okay. Are there certain roles in there that help give us definition?
I think so.
Okay. What roles did you hear Paul listing?
No, I'd probably need to read that again.
I mean, obviously, wives submitting to their husbands.
Wives.
Yes, wives submitting to their
Okay.
husbands.
Husbands.
Husbands, yes.
And then who will leave his mother and father?
The husband.
A man.
Man, yes.
Will leave his
yes.
mother and father and cleave to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in this New Testament example of a healthy family structure, we get explicit family roles.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not to harm us, it's not to hurt us. I think it brings clarity.
Mm-hmm.
It's to understand that in God's design, now you can fight his design all you want. That's your battle against God. But for me, the clarity that is given that a man is biologically a man, and he will cleave to his wife, who is a biological female, and they will leave their father, who is a biological male, and mother. This gives you what God was hoping for in family structure. And so maybe just as a closing statement, is there any encouragement that you would give to someone who is maybe dealing with some of this struggle right now? Maybe they're a biological male struggling in their identity, not understanding if God made a mistake with them. They have feelings and attractions that maybe are opposite of what we read in the scriptures. Is there maybe a last encouragement that you could give to young ladies in this subject?
I think just go to the word, go to the source. We know that the word is true, and find somebody who you trust that can give biblical advice, and can pray with you and can kind of help process through maybe your confusion. I don't think God looks down on confusion or doubt. I think it's okay to have that because we live in a sinful world. I think that's just part of a sinful world. But looking to the word, praying, asking for biblical advice from somebody you trust and somebody who you know is also in the word. So that's what I would say.
So you combat confusion with clarity. Okay, I like that. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that God's not disappointed in you, that he hasn't made a mistake, and he is not happy with the things that have maybe happened to you. And so as you're going through, processing your trauma and overworking that, I definitely say just knowing that you are chosen and that he's called you for a time as this, and he's not upset or disappointed. So I think it's okay to wrestle with that as long as the wrestle is in closeness with the Lord. And if you can't, maybe understand, like Liv said, in reading the scriptures, find somebody who can and who is closer to the Lord than you. And so hopefully they can help mentor you through that process.
Yeah, that's so good. Man, I so much appreciate both of you coming on and sharing your views, your opinions, some of what you do understand, some other things that are confusing. Our hope is that this has brought clarity. Again, I know this is a loaded conversation. I'm sure you may say it's not as simple as that, but our hope, at least here at Kingdom Clarity, is to bring biblical clarity to a controversial world and find someone that will walk through this with you. Find someone who won't just affirm every feeling, but they will actually address what's really going on in your heart. We all have things that God is wanting to minister to us in. And so I hope that you are less confused than you started. I hope that you'll join us back here next week. Have a blessed week.